Why do you think we're hearing so much more about ADHD now?
I think you're right, awareness is growing. Our knowledge is growing, as I mentioned, around beginning to understand how this actually presents in individuals. We've had for a very long time a traditional deficit-focused understanding of ADHD and really an evidence body that relates to a particular part of the population that basically didn't represent the rest of the population. So now that we're beginning to understand how ADHD can present, as an example of that, hyperactivity used to be considered as something where you're sort of bouncing around the room. We think of young people in schools not being able to sit still, which of course is a presentation of ADHD. But we now also know that hyperactivity can be somewhat internal. So we can have thoughts that are hyperactive. We can be flooded with thoughts. We can have difficulty managing one's thoughts and the flow and the hyperactivity that could basically occur in one's mind, I suppose. And of course, that's going to present very differently on the outside compared to externalized hyperactivity. I think too, we've got a very strong movement towards embracing differences, embracing neurodiversity. So we're moving away from that deficit focus, which has then allowed us to understand the strengths and the accommodations and all the amazing opportunities that are available when you do have these differences. And therefore, our understanding just keeps growing.
Is there any correlation between the growth of technology, the use of technology, distraction in general population, and more people getting diagnosed with ADHD? That busyness of the mind that you talk about, like, I would be lying if I said I didn't feel it, but where does that line get drawn, I guess? Well, I'm going to start off with, is there a correlation between, I guess, an increase in technology use and ADHD?
It's a tricky question to answer. And also, it's probably not my area of expertise. There are a lot of people doing research in this area in terms of the impact of technology use, the availability of social networking online. But what I would say is that there is a massive shift in how we socialise, in how we work, how we engage with our employers being almost entirely online, with the COVID pandemic and moving to remote working. I think the day-to-day life of people, and particularly the day-to-day life of young people, is ultimately different, and the availability and accessibility of technology is a huge part of that. To then draw the line to ADHD prevalence, which is what I think you're asking, is difficult because of at the same time as having this massive community population shift in day-to-day behaviour, we've also got that growing knowledge and understanding of ADHD. So I think the way in which we understand ADHD has a technology component to it because that's the way we socialise. And the way we interact with people, obviously, is the way in which we understand whether a neurodevelopmental difference is present. So it's not an overly straightforward answer, except to say that if we were to consider anyone's day-to-day life and any young person's day-to-day life, the way in which they experience the online world is very relevant compared to what even 5 or 10 years ago, and is continuing to shift.
Yeah, I think there's Jonathan Haidt has done a lot of work in sort of technology, attention of young people. And I think it's just interesting to find where that line is drawn, because I hear just flippantly, anecdotally, people almost self-diagnosing themselves with ADHD. They're like, I can't sit still, I'm so distracted. And it's interesting to know where that diagnosis gets drawn. So how does someone tell the difference between whether they are just overly distracted right now or they actually have ADHD?
It is tricky. I think what I would say is that, again, this shift in understanding that I keep speaking about, it's been fortunate that we've had a shift in understanding individual experiences, because historically they've often presented later in life as things like anxiety or depression and a general kind of misunderstanding of the underlying cause. So whilst I recognise that there are some arguments around the risks of sort of self-identifying, there's also this amazing opportunity that we've seen for people to basically understand where their challenges lie and therefore be able to accommodate them. I think in terms of whether I've got ADHD or not as a question, that's a professional comprehensive diagnostic assessment that is not possible to achieve without the right information sources, without the right skill set, without the right knowledge and expertise, essentially. But I guess what we're talking about here is when differences and challenges are persistent, present throughout one's life and one's early life. And I suppose too, what happens when we accommodate such differences in terms of how functional a person can be in their life. So it's not really a straightforward answer in terms of do I have ADHD or not because I've got this symptom. It is a comprehensive understanding of a human's experience, which is incredibly complex, through the lens of the appropriate expertise and professional skill.
If you've enjoyed that clip, then you might enjoy the full unedited version of that episode. All you got to do is click right here. Go.